The Ottoman Sultan's harem. Just the name conjures up visions of shimmering silks, gilded cages, and perfumed gardens, doesn't it? We picture corridors whispering with the secrets of powerful women, concubines and queens all fighting for the Sultan's attention. It was a world all its own, the ultimate symbol of the Sultan's wealth, power, and prowess. The imperial harem was the secluded heart of the palace, home to the Sultan's mother, his wives, children, and a huge staff of female servants and concubines, all guarded by eunuchs. For centuries, this is the version of Ottoman palace life that has captured our imagination. And it's true, the harem was a complex social and political machine, a maze of intrigue where fortunes were made and lives were shattered. The women inside weren't just objects of desire, they were serious players in a high-stakes game. The Sultan's own mother, the Valide Sultan, was often the most powerful person in the empire, second only to her son. This is the story we all think we know. But what if I told you that's only half the story? That the place of deepest trust, and a different kind of desire, wasn't always found in the female harem? What if there was another world, one that history has tried to forget, the Sultan's male inner circle? A world where young men were taken from their homes and plunged into a life of unbelievable luxury and terrifying control. This isn't just a historical footnote. It's a story about power, abuse, and a societal system that challenges everything we think we know about the Ottoman court. Today, we reveal the complex truth that got left behind. Now, when we use a term like male harem, it's important to be clear. The word harem in an Ottoman context specifically means the women's quarters of a household. So, a male harem didn't officially exist. But the Sultan's home, the sprawling Topkapi Palace, had another, equally secluded and even more exclusive domain. This was the Enderun, or the inner service. On the surface, the Enderun was a palace school, maybe even the world's first academy for gifted children. But it was so much more than that. It was the training ground for the absolute elite of the Ottoman Empire. The young men who walked through its gates were destined to become the most powerful administrators, military leaders, and statesmen in the world. So, who were these young men? They were called the Ikaglan, the inner palace boys. For centuries, they were chosen through a brutal system known as the devshirme. This was a human tax levied on the Christian communities of the Balkans. Ottoman officials would sweep through villages and select the most handsome, intelligent, and physically impressive boys, often between 8 and 18 years old, and take them from their families forever. These boys were then forcibly converted to Islam and brought to the capital to start a new life. They were, technically, slaves of the Sultan, but this was the first step on a golden path to immense power. They were chosen to be completely loyal to the Sultan alone, deliberately cut off from any family or regional ties that could ever compete with their devotion. Before even setting foot in the palace, the most promising boys were sent to live with Turkish families for several years. There, they learned the Turkish language, local customs, and the principles of Islam, effectively erasing their pasts. After this, they were brought back to the capital. Only the absolute best, the brightest, the strongest, and the most attractive, were chosen for the honor of entering the Enderun school inside the Topkapi Palace. The rest were sent to other parts of the imperial machine, most famously the elite infantry corps, the Janissaries. But for that chosen few, a life of incredible privilege and danger was waiting. They were entering a world they might never leave, a world that would bring them closer to the Sultan than anyone else. Life as an Ikaglan inside the Enderun was a dizzying paradox. These young men lived in opulent chambers within the palace's innermost court, a space so private that almost no outsiders ever saw it. They were surrounded by luxury, dressed in fine silks, and ate the best food the empire had to offer. Their education was second to none, covering everything from Islamic sciences, languages like Arabic and Persian, math, and law, to fine arts like music, poetry, and calligraphy. They were also trained in martial skills. This wasn't just school, it was a meticulous grooming process designed to create the perfect courtier. They were being molded into the Renaissance men of the Ottoman world, both sophisticated and deadly. Their daily duties brought them right into the Sultan's personal space. The inner service was divided into chambers with specific jobs. Pages might be assigned to the privy chamber, attending to the Sultan's personal needs, or the treasury, which housed the empire's vast wealth. They were the Sultan's constant companions, holding his stirrup when he mounted his horse, guarding his clothes, and serving his meals. Because of this constant closeness, the head of the privy chamber was one of the most influential people in the entire palace. But for all this intimacy and privilege, their lives were not their own. They were under constant, suffocating surveillance. Every move was watched, every word noted. In the bluntest terms, they were the Sultan's property. A Venetian envoy, Benedetto Ramberti, wrote with awe about the hundreds of youths in the palace, describing them as the delight of the Seigneur, or the Sultan. Their beauty and talent were seen as a reflection of the Sultan's own power. They were living in a gilded cage, where the price of luxury was total submission and the loss of all personal freedom. Proximity is power. And nobody was closer to the Sultan than the Ikaglan. While the Grand Vizier and other ministers ran the public business of the empire, the pages of the inner service moved in the private, hidden world of the palace. They were the Sultan's shadows and his confidants. In quiet moments, away from the formal court, their influence was truly felt. They heard the whispers no one else did. They saw the Sultan not just as a ruler, but as a man, with his own moods and fears. And a smart page could use that knowledge to his advantage. Historians believe these young men were not just servants, they were companions who provided crucial emotional support. A quiet word from a favored page could influence a political appointment, or even sway a military campaign. They were the gatekeepers to the most powerful man in the world, which made them targets for bribery and key players in the endless court intrigues. They had to learn to navigate a treacherous world of shifting alliances, where one wrong move could mean ruin, but a clever one could lead to incredible rewards. After graduating from the Enderun, these men were appointed to the highest offices in the land. They left the palace with an unmatched education, a deep understanding of power, and a direct line of loyalty to the Sultan. A young man who had spent his youth serving the Sultan's meals could become the governor of a huge province like Egypt. A page who mastered poetry and politics could become the Grand Vizier, the second most powerful man in the empire. This system was, by design, a meritocracy of slaves. It ensured the ruling class owed their entire existence to the Sultan, preventing powerful old families from challenging his authority. In this way, the beautiful boys taken from their homes became the steel frame that held the Ottoman state together. But behind the glitter of education and power lies a much more disturbing truth. The system was built on the foundation of abuse and a complete erasure of identity. These were children, torn from their families and forced into a life they never chose. The psychological trauma of having your name, religion, and past violently stripped away is almost impossible to imagine. And while the Enderun's official purpose was education and administration, the very nature of absolute power created a dangerous environment. The lines between master and servant, patron and favorite, could become dangerously blurred. In a world where one man held absolute authority, refusing his desires, whatever they might be, was not an option. Although there is no credible evidence the Enderun was structured as a sexual harem, the vulnerability of these young men, who were prized for their beauty and talent, was undeniable. Their role was to be the delight of the Sultan, a phrase that speaks to the total possession he had over them. This brings us to the eunuchs. It's a common misconception that the Enderun pages were eunuchs. They were not. The Ikaglan were chosen for their potential as future leaders. The eunuchs were a separate and distinct group within the palace. Often captured in Africa or the Caucasus and castrated as children, they were tasked with guarding the private spaces of the palace, most famously the female harem. Stripped of their ability to father children, they could never produce a rival heir to the throne, ensuring their loyalty. The chief black eunuch, who guarded the female harem, became one of the most powerful officials in the entire empire. But his power came at the cost of the most fundamental part of his being. This was the brutal reality of the palace. To get to the heart of the empire, you often had to sacrifice your identity, your freedom, and sometimes even your body. For centuries, this system, in all its complexity and cruelty, was a key part of Ottoman power. The intense, intimate relationships between the elite and their pages were a well-understood part of court culture. So why did this part of the story fade into the background? The answer lies in the massive changes of the 19th century. As the Ottoman Empire tried to modernize, it started looking to the West for models of government and society. European ideas about morality and sexuality, which were much more rigid, began to take hold. Relationships and dynamics that were once seen as a display of a patron's power and status started to be viewed through a new lens of Western stigma. The fluid world of the Ottoman court was clashing with stricter, more binary categories. Interestingly, this cultural shift didn't lead to legal punishment. In fact, in 1858, as part of its modernizing reforms, the Ottoman Empire decriminalized consensual same-sex relations, making it one of the first major powers to do so. The change was more about perception than law. In its effort to be seen as a modern European-style state, the empire began to downplay, reinterpret, and reframe parts of its own history. The stories of the Ikaglan, the homoerotic poetry, the portraits of beautiful young pages, it all became less palatable. It didn't fit the new image the empire wanted to project. And so, a complex and often brutal reality was slowly painted over with a simpler version of history. The male favorites who once held places of influence faded into the background, their stories not so much erased as they were intentionally left out of the new national narrative. What was once a symbol of the Sultan's ultimate power became a source of imperial awkwardness. The story of the Sultan's inner circle is a powerful reminder that the history we learn is often an edited version of the truth. It's a story of power, control, and what happens when cultures collide. It reveals a world far more complex than the simple tales of sultans and their veiled concubines. The lives of the Ikaglan show us that power has always had a dark and intimate side. They were both victims and players in a brutal game, their lives used as currency in the business of empire. Theirs is a disturbing truth, not because of simple tales of desire, but because it's a story of absolute control and the terrifying vulnerability of anyone caught in the orbit of that power. The fact that their story was so carefully reframed tells us as much about the 19th century's anxieties as it does about the 15th's realities. It shows how easily history can be reshaped by those in charge, and how many stories are still waiting to be told. If you want to learn more about the hidden truths and dark secrets that lie beneath the surface of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let us know in the comments what part of this forgotten history shocked you the most. And join us next time as we uncover more secrets of the past.